The elephant said, "Honored sir, this is Buddhist Books Podcast, episode 2 to the power of 8, Tipiṭaka, part 13 squared. Sorry about all the math today. I just couldn't resist. So 2 to the power of 8, of course, for those who are, still in high school, 2 to the power of 1 is 2, 2 to the power of 2 is 4, 8, 16, 32, you just double it each time, 64, 128, 256, right? 13 times 13 is 169. So anyway, we had some exponents today, 2 of them, so couldn't resist. So today we're going to be reading Mahāvagga VI. We're going to be continuing Mahāvagga VI. This is Mahāvagga, if you want to start with Mahāvagga 1, part 1. And Mahāvagga's great division. It's in the Vinaya Piṭaka, which is the discipline basket of the 3 baskets of pre-sectarian early Buddhism. And if you would like to start at the very beginning of the Tipiṭaka with the rules for monks, it's often interesting, especially that first episode. You can click right here. That's the Tipiṭaka playlist, and that'll get you going. If, on the other hand, you are interested in other things besides pre-sectarian early Buddhism, like, for example, Mahayana Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, both Tibetan and Japanese forms, as well as Zen Buddhism, then you might want to check out the main Buddhist Books playlist, starting with the introduction. That'll explain, how to navigate. So the main playlist is here. That's the one where there's 256 episodes as of today. If you're in the future, that number will be higher. All right. This is the point in the episode where I start reading. Okay. I'm pretty sure this is where we left off, so I will start right here. Then the Lord, walking on tour, in due course arrived at Rajagaha. The Lord stayed there in Rajagaha in the bamboo grove at the squirrel's feeding place. Now at that time the Lord came to have an affliction of wind in the stomach. So right there is the difference between pre-sectarian early Buddhism and every other form of Buddhism. I'm willing to bet. I would bet money. I probably shouldn't bet money. That's not very Buddhist, is it? But if I were a betting man, I would bet money that in all the scriptures of Mahayana Buddhism and all the tantras of Vajrayana Buddhism and in all the writings of all the Zen masters of old, you will not find a reference to Lord Buddha farting. But in pre-sectarian early Buddhism, well, here we go. Let's do this. Then the Venerable Ananda, that's Ananda here on Buddhist Books Podcast. He's the guru in Avatar: The Last Airbender, the original cartoon, the only real... Yes. The Venerable Ananda thinking, quote, on a former occasion, the Lord's affliction of wind, so it's happened before. This is a recurring thing. We all get them. We all have those days, right? And who knows what they were eating back then. The Lord's affliction of wind in the stomach was eased by kanji containing the 3 pungent ingredients. End quote. Having himself prepared sesamum and rice grain and kidney bean, having cured them indoors, having himself cooked them indoors. brought them to the Lord, saying, quote, Lord, drink the kanji containing the 3 pungent ingredients. End quote. Now, truth finders, parentheses sometimes, and parentheses ask knowing, and knowing, parentheses sometimes, and parentheses do not ask. They ask knowing the right time, parentheses to ask, end parentheses, and they do not ask knowing the right time, parentheses, when not to ask, end parentheses. Truth finders ask about what belongs to the goal, not about what does not belong to the goal. Bridge breaking for truth finders is among what does not belong to the goal. Awakened ones, lords, question monks concerning 2 matters, either, quote, shall we teach Dhamma, end quote, or, quote, shall we lay down a rule of training for disciples, end quote. Then the Lord addressed the Venerable Ananda, saying, quote, where does this kanji come from, Ananda, end quote. Then the Venerable Ananda told this matter to the Lord. The awakened one, the Lord rebuked him, saying, quote, it is not becoming, Ananda. It is not fitting. It is not suitable. It is not worthy of a recluse. For one, I'm a little lost, but we'll see where this goes. I'm not sure what Ananda did wrong, but he must have done something. Okay. Yeah, it is not to be done. And how can you, Ananda, strain after abundance such as this? Moreover, Ananda, that which is cured indoors. Cured indoors is abundance. Okay. Is unallowable, and that which is cooked indoors is also unallowable, and that which is cooked by oneself is also unallowable. Okay. It is not, Ananda, for pleasing those who are not, parentheses yet, end parentheses pleased, 3 dots, end quote. And having rebuked him, having given reason to talk, he addressed the monks, saying, quote, monks, one should not make use of what is cured indoors, cooked indoors, cooked by one's self. Whoever should make use, parentheses, of any of these things, end parentheses, there is an offense of wrongdoing. If, monks, it is cured indoors, cooked by oneself, and one should make use of it, there is an offense of 3 wrongdoings. If, monks, it is cured indoors, parentheses, but, end parentheses, cooked by others, and one should make use of it, there is an offense of 2 wrongdoings. If, monks, it is cooked indoors, cooked out of doors, cooked by oneself, and one should make use of it, there is an offense of 2 wrongdoings. If, monks, it is cured out of doors, cooked indoors, cooked by oneself, and one should make use of it, there is an offense of 2 wrongdoings. If you're good at math, then you'll know how much longer we're going to be listing off possible combinations. If, monks, it is cured indoors, cooked out of doors, cooked by others, and one should make use of it, there is an offense of wrongdoing. If, monks, it is cured out of doors, cooked out of doors, parentheses, but, end parentheses, cooked by oneself, and one should make use of it, there is an offense of wrongdoing. If, monks, it is cured out of doors, cooked by others, and one should make use of it, there is no offense. End quote. Now, a better man than me, a teacher, a scholar of Buddhism, which I am not, I remind you. If you've seen the introduction, you already know that. Might be able to just simply explain to you why a monk should not cook food, but I can only speculate. And I think it's connected to, monks go out and as they say, beg for alms, right? I mean, they don't like, please give me alms, but they go out and say, would you like to give me food? I'm a monk, like more dignified. They get alms, food cooked by others, and or food that hasn't been cooked, food that you don't cook, that kind of thing. But to cook your own food is kind of like, are you an ascetic or are you a householder? Yeah, that's householder behavior, cooking your own food. Now, of course, this was the original Sangha. Later on, I know, at least into Mahayana days, there would be a designated monk who was the cook, or maybe two, that would prepare the meals for the whole monastery. So, I don't know. Anyway, comment below if you have some insight about this. Now, at that time, monks thinking, quote, cooking for oneself is objected to by the Lord, end quote, were doubtful about a second cooking. They told this matter, reheating something. They told this matter to the Lord. He said, quote, I allow you monks to cook a second cooking, end quote. Okay. So if you don't finish your food and then you want to reheat it later. I seem to remember that being against the rules in the rules for monks, but a second cooking. Well, anyway, maybe that'll be explained later. Oh, reheating food that was already cooked once. Yeah, okay. There was a monk that went out for alms and came back and had rice, I think, rice and something, and he set aside and dried some of it, and then later he reheated it. I think he added water to it and reheated it, and that was against the rules, but I don't know. It doesn't matter too much since we're not 6th century before Common Era Buddhist monks and nuns. But anyway, continuing. Okay, he said, I allow a second cooking. Now at that time, Rajagaha became short of food. People conveyed salt and oil and husked rice and solid food to the monastery. The monks cured these out of doors, but vermin ate them and also thieves carried them off. They told this matter to the Lord. He said, quote, I allow you monks to cure indoors, end quote. Okay, so at one point, for 10 minutes, 2,600 years ago, it was against the rules for monks to cure indoors. And then it wasn't. Interesting. Good to know. If that comes up on Jeopardy, then you might. All right, where were we? That when they had cured, parentheses, the things, and parentheses, indoors, they cooked them out of doors, parentheses, but, and parentheses, those who live on the remains of food crowded round. The monks, not trusting them, made use of, parentheses, the food, and parentheses. They told this matter to the Lord. He said, quote, I allow you monks to cook indoors, end quote. Okay, so they weren't allowed to cook at all. They weren't allowed to cure or cook indoors. And now they're cooking, which seems to be fine. And they're curing and cooking indoors, which seems to be fine. All right. I'll keep reading. When food was short, those who made it allowable carried away the larger, parentheses, portion, end parentheses, and gave the monks the lesser, parentheses, portion, end parentheses. They told this matter to the Lord. He said, quote, I allow you monks yourselves to cook. They were already cooking, weren't they? Maybe someone else was cooking. I allow you monks. Oh, someone came in and cooked, and then they took most of the food with them. All right. I allow you monks what is cured indoors, what is cooked indoors, what is cooked by yourselves, end quote. All right. So monks 2,600 years ago, for a minute, weren't allowed to do those things, and then they were. And they still are. Which explains why you have monks that are cooks, cooking for the monks in the monastery. Even back then. Okay. Now at that time, several monks, having spent the rains in Kasi, going to Rajagaha to see the Lord, did not obtain on the way sufficient mediocre or fine meals, as much as they needed. Yet there was much solid food that was fruit, but there was no one to make it allowable. Okay. So these monks, weary in body, approached Rajagaha, the bamboo grove, the squirrel's feeding place, the Lord. Having approached, having greeted the Lord, they sat down at a respectful distance. Now it is the custom for awakened ones, for lords, to exchange friendly greetings with incoming monks. So the Lord spoke thus to these monks, quote, I hope, monks, things are going well with you. I hope you are keeping going. I hope you have come here with but little fatigue on the journey. ? On the journey? And where, monks, do you come from? End quote. Quote, things are going well with us, Lord, but we, Lord, having spent the rains in Kasi, coming to Rajagaha to see the Lord, ... no one to make it allowable, the fruit. Apparently you have to have someone to make fruit allowable. I don't know if we've gotten to that and I forgot, or if we haven't gotten to it yet. Sometimes things that explain things come later in the text. It's like it assumes you've already read the whole thing. Like when you have to watch a movie twice for it to make sense, like Memento or something. Okay. Yes. Thus we have come on the journey weary in body. End quote. Then the Lord, on this occasion, having given reasoned talk, addressed the monks, saying, quote, I allow you, monks, if one anywhere sees solid food that is a fruit, but if there is no one to make it allowable, having taken it oneself, having carried it away, having seen someone to make it allowable, having laid it down on the ground to make use of it, he, and having, formally, and offered it to you, I allow you, monks, to receive, formally, and what you have picked up. All right. And end quote. Sometimes things make more sense in 6th century BCE Bihar. Maybe it just doesn't translate in 2024. I'll keep reading. Now at that time, fresh sesamum and fresh honey had accrued to a certain Brahmin. Then it occurred to that Brahmin, quote, suppose I were to give the fresh sesamum and fresh honey to the order of monks, with the awakened one at its head. End quote. A good Brahmin. Then that Brahmin approached the Lord. Having approached, he exchanged friendly greetings with the Lord. Having exchanged greetings of friendliness and courtesy, he stood at a respectful distance. And standing at a respectful distance, that Brahmin spoke thus to the Lord, quote, Lord, may the revered Gautama, together with the order of monks, consent to a meal with me tomorrow. End quote. The Lord consented by becoming silent. I like that. I think we should bring that back. If somebody asks you a question and the answer is yes, you just don't answer. And they know that you mean yes, because if it had been no, you would have said something. Would you like to come to a meal with me? All right, I'll see you there. It just seems classy. Then that Brahmin departed, having understood the Lord's consent. Then that Brahmin, having had, towards the end of that night, sumptuous solid food and soft food prepared, had the time announced to the Lord, saying, quote, it is time, good Gautama, the meal is ready. End quote. Then the Lord, having dressed in the morning, taking his bowl and robe, approached that Brahmin's dwelling. Having approached, he sat down together with the order of monks on the appointed seat. Then that Brahmin, having with his own hand served and satisfied with sumptuous solid food and soft food the order of monks with the awakened one at its head, sat down at a respectful distance when the Lord had eaten and withdrawn his hand from his bowl. While that Brahmin was sitting down at a respectful distance, the Lord, having gladdened, rejoiced, roused, delighted him with talk on Dhamma, rising from his seat, departed. Then it occurred to that Brahmin soon after the Lord had departed, quote, I forgot to give those things for the sake of which I invited the order of monks with the awakened one at its head, thinking, quote within quotes, I will give fresh sesamum and fresh honey, end quote within quotes. Suppose I were to have the fresh sesamum and fresh honey conveyed to the monastery in pots and pitchers. End quote. It seems reasonable to me, but we'll see what Lord Buddha thinks. I mean, the Brahmin isn't one of his monks, so it's not like he can make a rule for the Brahmin, but maybe something happened. We'll see where this goes. I'm intrigued. Then that Brahmin, having had the fresh sesamum and the fresh honey conveyed to the monastery in pots and pitchers, approached the Lord. Having approached, he stood at a respectful distance. As he was standing at a respectful distance, this Brahmin spoke thus to the Lord, quote, I forgot to give those things, good Gautama, for the sake of which I invited the order of monks with the awakened one at its head, thinking, quote within quotes, I will give fresh sesamum and fresh honey, end quote within quotes. May the Reverend Gautama accept from me fresh sesamum and fresh honey, end quote. Quote, well then, Brahmin, give them to the monks, end quote. Now at that time, because food was scarce and they offered them only a little, monks considerately refused, but a whole order was offered, parentheses, food, end parentheses. The monks, being scrupulous, did not accept it. Parentheses, the Lord said, end parentheses, quote, accept, parentheses, the food, end parentheses, monks, make use of it. I allow you, monks, having eaten and being satisfied, to make use of food that is not left over, if it was taken back from there, end quote. Now at that time, the family who supported the Venerable Upananda, it's been a while since we've seen the Venerable Upananda. If I had to guess, he's probably going to get up to something involving a robe and or his brother's cellmate. If you know Upananda, then you know what I'm talking about. I will keep reading. The son of the Sakyans sent solid food for the order, saying, okay, now at that time, a family who supported the Venerable Upananda, the son of the Sakyans, sent solid food for the order, saying, quote, having pointed it out as for Master Upananda, it should be given to the order, end quote. Now at that time, the Venerable Upananda, the son of the Sakyans, which in subtext and reading between the lines means he's related to Lord Buddha, which also means that he didn't have to go through a lot of the same trials to become a monk. Lord Buddha came out and said, we're going to do nepotism here. So anybody who's a cousin of mine or from the same house, from the same family of mine, if they want to be a monk, you just make them a monk. You don't need to prove themselves or anything like that, like with everyone else that I'm not related to. And everybody was like, well, nobody's talking about Nepo babies yet. It's going to be another 2,600 years before that becomes a thing. So, yeah, okay, that's the rule then. If they're related to Lord Buddha, then let them in. So Upananda, Nepo baby. Anyway, in this particular context, where were we? Yes, okay. Now at that time the Venerable Upananda, the son of the Sakyans, had entered the village for alms food. Then these people, having gone to the monastery, asked the monks, quote, "Where, honored sirs, is Master Upananda?" He's right here. Don't you see him? Just kidding. And quote, "Sirs, this Venerable Upananda, the son of the Sakyans, has entered the village for alms food." End quote. Quote, "Honored sirs, having pointed out this solid food as for Master Upananda, it should be given to the order." End quote. They told this matter to the Lord. He said, quote, "Well then, monks, having accepted it, put it aside until Upananda comes back." End quote. Then the Venerable Upananda, the son of the Sakyans, having visited the families before the meal, came back during the day. Now at that time, because food was scarce and they offered them only a little, monks considerately refused. But a whole order was offered, parentheses, food, and parentheses. The monks, being scrupulous, did not accept it. Parentheses, the Lord said, end parentheses, quote, "Accept, parentheses, the food, end parentheses. Monks, make use of it. I allow you, monks, having eaten and being satisfied, to make use of, parentheses, food, end parentheses, that is not left over if it was accepted before a meal." End quote. Then the Lord, having stayed at Rajagaha for as long as he found suiting, set out on tour for Savatthi. In due course, walking on tour, he arrived at Savatthi. Then the Lord stayed there at Savatthi in the Jeta Grove in Anathapindika's monastery. Now at that time the Venerable Shariputra had fever. I don't think we've assigned a character. Since we gave Ananda a character, I think it's time to give the Venerable Shariputra a character. Okay, so that's the Venerable Shariputra. Now, if you're wondering, why is he pronouncing Shariputra so strangely? It's because Pali. Originally, it was Dhamma, not Dharma. Originally, it was Shariputra, not Shariputra. Sanskrit, Pali are a little different. Okay, continuing. Then the Venerable Moggallana the Great approached the Venerable Shariputra. Having approached, he spoke thus to the Venerable Shariputra. Quote, "When you, Reverend Shariputra, previously had fever, by what means was it eased?" End quote. Quote, "I had lotus fibers and stalks, your reverence." End quote. Then the Venerable Moggallana the Great, as a strong man might stretch out his bent arm or might bend back his outstretched arm, even so did he, vanishing from the Jeta Grove, appear on the banks of the Mandakini lotus tank. A certain elephant saw the Venerable Moggallana the Great coming in the distance, like walking, Seeing him, he spoke thus to the Venerable Moggallana the Great. Quote, sorry, I tried. I shouldn't have. He's an elephant, so he's speaking. Okay. The elephant said, "Honored sir, let Master Moggallana the Great come." There is a welcome, honored sir, for Master Moggallana the Great. "What, honored sir, does the master need? What can I give him?" End quote. Quote, "I need lotus fibers and stalks, friend." End quote. Then that elephant commanded another elephant, saying, quote, "Well now, good fellow, give the master as many lotus fibers and stalks as he needs." End quote. Then that elephant, having plunged into the Mandakini lotus tank, having with his trunk pulled lotus fibers and stalks, having washed them clean, having tied them into a bundle, approached the Venerable Moggallana the Great. Then the Venerable Moggallana the Great, as a strong man might stretch out his bent arm or might bend back his outstretched arm, even so did he, vanishing from the bank of the Mandakini lotus tank, appear in the Jeta Grove. And that elephant, too, vanishing from the bank of the Mandakini lotus tank, appeared in the Jeta Grove. Then that elephant, having offered the Venerable Moggallana the Great the lotus fibers and stalks, vanishing from the Jeta Grove, appeared on the bank of the Mandakini lotus tank. Then the Venerable Moggallana the Great brought the lotus fibers and stalks to the Venerable Sariputta. Then as the Venerable Sariputta was making use of the lotus fibers and stalks, his fever abated. Many lotus fibers and stalks came to be left over. Now, at that time, because food was scarce and they offered them only a little, monks considerately refused, but a whole order was offered, food, and the monks, being scrupulous, did not accept it. The Lord said, and quote, accept, the food, and monks, make use of it. I allow you, monks, having eaten and being satisfied, to make use of food, and that is not left over, if it grows in a wood, if it grows in a lotus tank. End quotes. And that's the end of our reading for today. And that was fun, I'd say. I always like having an excuse to play this. Nihao Shariputra, indeed. That was, of course, a version of the, I'm pretty sure, the Chinese version of the Heart of Great Wisdom Sutra. The Japanese version being the Hanya Shingyo. And in the original Sanskrit, if I'm not mistaken, it's the Pranya Paramita, and then that becomes Hanya Haramita in medieval Japanese, just because things like that happen. Anyway, so in the Heart Sutra, which is a Mahayana scripture, 1,000 years after this, it was Avalokiteshvara, also known as Chenrezig, also known later as Kuan Yin and Kannon, who's depicted here. The Bodhisattva of Compassion was speaking to Shariputra. And the same one, because in a lot of the Mahayana scriptures, it's the same cast of characters that are familiar from the Tipiṭaka that are having adventures, having the further adventures of, sort of like, for you who are fans of Dune, the Brian Herbert and Kevin Anderson books are like the Mahayana of the Dune universe, you might say. Okay, I guess that's it for today. I hope that you enjoyed yourself. If you're still here and you're not like hate watching, then do feel free to click like and subscribe, and then you can enjoy further episodes of Buddhist Books Podcast. And I guess that's it for today. I will do my usual closing in the form of the closing of when I was young. My dad and I would do this Tibetan, chanting meditation, and it would close with this prayer. And when I was very young, my dad would say it, and then he taught it to me, and then we would say it together. So I like to close these episodes with that prayer. To the north and to the south, to the east and to the west, to the spirits of light among us and to the spirits below, we send out our reverent love and compassion. May all beings be happy. May all beings be serene. May all beings be in peace. Until next time.